Herzlich willkommen.
Welcome to our session on day 3. We have a very exciting topic. It's about minorities online. No we without us. 31%, 9% diesel, 0% education. So this is what Bild was talking about, the discussion between the two chancellor candidates. So 39% discussion about were the white people in the discussion were talking about migrants. So this shows the slant that our public has and how distorted our public reception has about what the society is actually talking about or should be talking about. And there's no day happening where I'm not reading something about Islam, migration, refugees, or integrations is being debated. But the actual object, the person with a migratory background, is pretty irritated in the center of attention, but without a voice. Without us, no we. This is the thesis of this panel, and we want to go search for strategies, also digital strategies that we need to have more actual visibility. And we're discussing this with 3 very interesting experts. Sorry, we couldn't find any white people. We searched for months, but it's just says that you good. Ferda Ataman. She's a columnist and creator of the initiative New German Media Makers, and ever since 2017 she's a speaker for the New German Organization, a corporation between 100 groups or more against racism and for diversity. She's also a columnist. Ever since April 2018 she started a home column at Spiegel Online, and she's bringing new wind into this pretty dry debate. Dominik Wullers, on the outer right here, he's co-creator of the German soldiers community, which is about German soldiers with a migratory background, and are seeing themselves during the Sarrazin debate as a living no to his thesis, economy in Hamburg. He was also 13 years as an officer and now as being a press speaker. And then to my rest, Kijan Espahangizi. Kijan Espahangizi. It not only happens to whites. Okay. Kijan Espahangizi is promoted historian and scientist and leader of the Center for History Science in Zurich. He's working on the history of migrating science and also post-migrated society, and ever since 10 years he's a foreign worker in academia in Switzerland, and he's co-president the Post-Migratory Think and Act Institute of New Switzerland, INES. And he's also in the okay, for migration. So our title today is Without Us No We, but if we were being very provocant, some minorities, especially minorities who are migrating or refugees or of Muslimic beliefs, they are very much the topic and they are very much in the public. But there are actually lots of migrants and people with migrant backgrounds who are almost always in the talk shows. So how can it be that we're still talking about this topic? And if you're saying without us no we, is there with us no we? Oh, I think with us there's also no we, and the question is also who is we, but the talk shows are a very good example for this. In the last few years, it was always that debates all about Pegida, then AfD, then refugees were all talked about, and all of the people debating and all the panels were all white. And an all-white panel for this is very irritating. But of course you're right. Then they asked representatives of migrants and Muslims, and there's two aspects to this. One, why are they also not there when we're talking about finance, politics, about Europe, about other topics, than those who are actually directly touching them? And the other question is, who are you inviting there? If you invite Hamid Abdel Samad and say, okay, now we have a migratory representative and he talks about Islam and Muslims, and that's like if I invite Thilo Sarrazin to a panel with the AfD, like the opposite of the SPD. That's how you can imagine this. Of course, even within the migratory scene, there are a lot of perspectives. And I, for one, my favorite talk show is with Frank Plasberg a few weeks ago, where there was this great, very funny comedian for her first time in a thing, Enisa Amani, and okay, so she didn't really fit into this format, and she wanted to kiss Frank Plasberg and told his wife she shouldn't worry. But the other thing is, she talked to Cem Özdemir, Hamid Abdel Samad, and a fourth person with a Duar Saitumun, and she was fighting with them. So it was like a Kanak show in the TV, and that was very revolutionary. And so they fought amongst each other, and so this was nice. So invite all of them with all the different perspectives, and then now I'm going back to the other thing, me. So I am grateful if someone is there whose name is hard to pronounce, so I can see, okay, this is Germany in the 21st century in all the facets.
Dominik?
So Dominik, you have been on a demonstration where you just walked past, basically. You're working in a uniform, and the protesters were asking you to just add yourself to the row. Well, we already talked about instrumentalizing people. I don't want to talk about being instrumentalized, but maybe some people instrumentalize themselves. Okay. But how do you prevent instrumentalization? How do you handle a debate that's so much filled with emotion to
So your organization stands for the army, but also for diversity, and that's like seems to irritate people. So how can you be complex and differential in this? Okay, so our organization is not for the army. So it does not stand for the army. This is an important distinction, and everyone will probably be disappointed because they expected a long rant about the army and Republika, but like basically, if we come to this, I have an opinion, but I did write an article in Die Zeit, and I'm still of the same opinion. So just read this article, and otherwise I will stay within the topic. And the Pegida thing, I thought this was not only bad because I have a very different opinion from them, but also I was in uniform, and for me the uniform is a symbol of the state, and it is not supposed to be politic, and it's not allowed. It shouldn't to be politic. And even if I had been of their opinion, then I still would have hoped that they would have been so reflective to say like, I cannot do this in the uniform. And so from a basic standpoint, I don't think we reacted that there would be such a large need for discussion about our name, as we found out when we wanted to talk to people about our thoughts and ideas. So you would say that it actually arrived, and you actually, in this debate, which has very simple narratives, you try to irritate and to disrupt. Yes, absolutely. Our impulse was that we saw Sarrazin, and it was not only about the Bundeswehr, the army, and to push them, but we wanted to show positive symbols and to find something where you could say people with migration background, how, like, whatever you want to call them, it's a very long word, but they give us a positive part into our society. And so we decided that we take ourselves, because we are the closest to ourselves in this moment, and let's just like advertise our own biographies, because us with our parents and our life stories swore an oath to protect this country, and we also, for this country and for the values, we are getting shot at, or we shoot people to protect this country. So our impulse was to take this very polemic element and to use it. Mr. Sarrazin cannot be completely right that migration is only bad and only the German genes are muddled, but we have many ways in which people with a migration background can integrate into our society, and like a provocant example is, for example, us, and that was the thought behind it, and that is very fruitful. Jan, you're also researching post-migrant media landscape, and you also, both of those talked about how to integrate into this media landscape, and people with migration background and with a certain identity always have to talk about certain topics and not other topics, and you talked about your own, using your own identity to affect this discourse and like to silence this discourse and say like, what about us? And you're researching these topics, and why can we not just reach this post-migrant media landscape? Like there's post-migration theater culture and all these debates. How do we make the jump to a post-migrant media landscape where diversity is not like the Turkish guy talks about Turkey, Muslims talk about the Islam, but diversity means that it's just there without explicitly having been the cause of discussion. So I would say I want to go back a step, and the post-migrant thing is not a utopia where everything is working right, but it's an idea of analyzing the present, a present that is not very clear. And the question is, what are we talking about? Is it about migration? Is it about diversity? Or what are we talking about? And I think what we are talking about is a very base thing. We don't even need the word migration, which is the question: how do we organize a democratic society that has experienced various societal transformation regarding migration, globalization, different expansions, transformations, and we are at a point where different institutions that shape this societal reality. So that is the political, but also other institutions like the army and the media. How do we create a reflection of that? And this is a process where no one has a real answer. There's a lot of experience, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of best practices, but there's many question marks, like how this should work. And the point is, it really helps to say what is actually our central point what we are talking about when we are talking about integration. And here I am very thankful for mispronouncing my names. Like I was at another conferences yesterday and my name was mispronounced as well from a white woman. And the example for a post-migration society is like where one side is the white people and the other is people with migration background. Whoever are these people? Because of course, this history of this statistical category of this background in the 40s or the 50s, if they had found that already, we wouldn't even talk about minorities. So it's very fluid. But the other way around, the interesting thing is that whatever we stumble upon situations that are unknown, just like the white professor yesterday, and why is it in the one case very bad and in your case not very bad? In both cases I would say it's funny, it's not very dramatic, but we should talk about what is happening here. And the question, how how do you show this in the media? And I'm not an expert in the media. I don't work in the media. I'm in science. One point that goes through all the institutions is that we need to know, we need to start at a different level. We need to check who is active in these situations, what are the contents. It's not only about the names, it's about contents. It's not enough to put someone here who looks like this, but there has to be a diversity of opinion, because we are of different opinions. The question is of the audience, like which audience do we target? We don't have a simple recipe, but one thing is clear. So the thing distinguishing the current situation is which institutions are ready to acknowledge that we need to change things. That is the questions. Not the people who say, like, I know what to do, but if an institution says we don't have any problem, like the Homeland Ministry, then that's a problem. But if a ministry says we want to start and we make mistakes, but we will try around, but there needs to be a playground where you can say this was racist and this was something else, because we all don't really know. But we don't start at zero. These experiences need to have their space, and that's what I want to measure. And so we work together with cultural institutions. Sorry, I need to hold the microphone closer. Please repeat everything you just said. Okay, then you realize, then suddenly you reach a point where there's no willing, people are not willing. So we are thinking, okay.
I have to interrupt you, because on the one hand, someone is not your opinion, but there's something else here. Because you just talked about the names. I think it's a little difficult, because no one can say, well, you misspelled the name, you're racist. I don't know that case, but what I really think is problematic is, I don't know who remembers that. It might be about 10 years ago, where there was this mountain that spit fire on Iceland. Every TV presenter had this name on the paper, and some people stumbled upon this name, and many people in here say Cem Özdemir. So I'm a little, well, there's a difference between the experience of racism that people make. There's a difference if you are labeled white or not. Yeah, fair enough. I would say so. But how do we handle this? Do we have a way to handle this if we talk about this? Or do we just escalate it from 0 to 100? My name is always misspelled in the Iranian company, and it's also truth. But I also know what you mean, and both is a case. There's differences. What means labeled white is my mom labeled white because she's white. Who is telling me it's a little difficult. We couldn't just ignore these problems. But when institutions don't want to change, but I think a little less escalation helps those voices who try to prevent that from right-wing populism to happen. You just destroyed my system here. But maybe we talk about this. You always talk about escalation. And if I understand you right, it's also about when do we react to people and when do we point that out, especially Dominik, you talked about that. You also talked about that. You also wrote about that on the topic, how do we handle our feelings? And your words are, in the last years, many migrants realized that the Swiss promise doesn't work anymore. And it's still kind of an empty expression. And you said in an interview that you're emotionally, well, disabled, basically. Did we suppress our emotions on these podiums, and we just explained it? And maybe maybe we just didn't catch the moment where we could just say, okay, I don't want to take part in this anymore, and I want stuff to happen differently. Yeah, well, absolutely. I don't know how often I heard that sentence, you shouldn't be that angry black woman in journalism. You say you have to pick up people where they stand, for example, in their fear being foreign in their own country. I would say that we all, or at least I, well, took part in this. One classical example, the federal government said they make some kind of Islam conference and IT summit, and all migrants come there. And, well, the migrant communities were allowed to come. No one actually thought, what do we want from them? Everyone thought it was great to get to the Chancellor's office. And these are things, well, it's kind of normal, yeah, it's a work in progress, but we have to have the courage to be radical in front of everyone. We should have that, and I feel that we have to be more open and to call racism racism, and to make sure that, and to point out, to write as the hashtag next time any talk show or something happens and there's just white people, yeah, I would call that, and I want to stand up, and we all have to stand up for that. I signed many petitions in the last weeks that are against it and pro something, because I kind of get the feeling, and you also forward them, right? Sorry. Well, I want to say that it's not fitting to have this black background, but there's a parallel thing between the discussion in the rights movement and the black people with Martin Luther King in the USA, and on the other hand, Malcolm X and his movement. There's the question, evolution and reforms against revolution, and in our community we have different views on this. Do we just fight the AfD to just throw fire bombs on their places, or do we have to talk to the 20% plus in the society? Even my mother belongs to that. She's 73, and she says things I really have to think about really hard, and it doesn't really fit. And, well, should I just leave her behind? And, well, you're just an old Nazi woman, we don't see each other again. I think there's many people that have to be saved in our modern Germany. In my country, I want to have what we actually are, but we are in a phase where we have a regression. I'm on the side of those people who say that in the long term we have to have a dialogue and not to burn all the bridges and to have all these controversies even stronger.
Okay, but I gotta say it's very important that we need to have the good cops and the bad cops and whatever, and we should distribute the roles and whatever. But for me, it's definitely the wrong start to stand there and say like, oh yeah, we want acknowledgement because we are so important. So many migration kids past their A-levels, but also like kids who went to a lower school have a right to be acknowledged as a German problem if something is not working. And what we did for a long time, but we're nice and we're not that criminal and we're not all anti-Semites and we're not all grabbing women. No, of course I know that you don't do that. Grabbing women, like keeping your distance. I just wanted to say that the question that you have with that, what you just said, is do you really want to be seen as German? Like that's the next debate. That's the question that I always have, is like, I do want to be seen as a German. I go into the debate, and when I leave the debate, I want everyone to see that you can also be German with a black skin. But a part of the community also says, I don't want that. I don't want to keep this, and I want to touch it with pliers. So, and I also think that this is also a very important discourse. If if we say that us versus them, what is the identity that we want to have? And for me, I want to claim the German identity. And that's a different identity than the AfD and Poggenburg want to have, but this is an identity that's open and that's based on the constitution, that we take part in society and that we usually have the same language, but not our blood, as it was in the constitution until 1990s. And these are the things that I say I want them, and these are important to me, and I correct people if they ask where I really come from. But the question is, are we really as homogeneous, as monolithic, that everyone says we want that, and I say no, and we had like important debates for this. And yeah, this is a different discussions. Is this, Kijan, is this a either or is this can this be combined? I have to say, like, maybe I was as angry enough in the 90s that I'm just like exhausted, and I need to reach this still. Kijan has a Kanak attack history, and I really have to say, I can really understand this, like, but you have to seriously talk about what is the political project behind that. I don't say like anger that can't be there, but we have to debate what is the society project. We can talk a long time about communities and about society and society politics questions, but we have to ask ourselves, how can we find a position where we can have an exchange? Like an example from Switzerland, we can learn from other countries. Like, for example, the AfD is actually in the government, more or less, ever since the 90s. It's the biggest party with over 30%. But it's not that in the society the potential is larger. Like from a Swiss view, everything is nice. They say everything is nice, like just chill out. But in Switzerland, they mobilized way too many people, and this is about massive popularizations. It's a historical fact that if you use this polarization like a division, then you're actually like strengthening their culture, and this is the spiral that we want to eject from. We want to leave. So we just have to say, like, migration is bad? Is it good? If I ask my dad, he's the first one who says, like, immigration isn't bad. It's bad. It hurt. It was shitty. It is neither good nor bad. It's just a fact. Diversity, is it nice? Yes, but it brings problems as well. It's neither good nor bad. It's a fact. As long as we are in a democratic society, we have to actually acknowledge that. And I don't like push diversity up, because that leads to polarization, because people from my camp says diversity is good, others say it's bad, so that just divides people. I want to be clearly, and I love being clearly, and let's talk about racism, but we have to talk about racism everywhere. Racism is everywhere. Like your mom is saying racist things. Don't you think in the Iranian community people wouldn't say racist thing, or in the black community? Like I've heard all of this. It doesn't make everyone the same, but we're all positioned the same. And if you acknowledge that, then you could be in a talk where there's a possibility of not being in two camps at the end. So I don't agree with this claim too white. And if people at the end look at the TV and they say, like, oh yeah, I see their noses and they're too white, but if I look at their families, maybe some have a Holocaust background or whatever. So do I see that in the face? I'm very critical of this whiteness discourse that only uses the skin color, and you can do that, but with I don't see you can use this as winning over the society.
Okay, I have to interrupt you again. This discourse is even more differentiated and has more facets than you just said that in a side sentence. And we had a talk before about that, and it's not. Well, you're always walking further to the back, and well, you're just trying to part from us, just to show you that as soon as we are on the stage, that we don't agree. I think that's a good example of that. But I think it's interesting what you say, Kijan, because the question for me is, and maybe for all of you, do we have this racism and integration discourse and the debates? did we make them so big because we are engaged in them? Because we're romanticizing the fleeing and immigration. It's a question to all of you who wants to answer this. Okay, right, yeah, I go for it. Well, it's not about guilt. I think we added to the discourse reaching a certain area, but shouldn't we have done it? I think no. The things we did generally were to be done, and I think this opinion change after Sylvester in Cologne, we didn't really enlarge them or something. What led to this was we didn't talk about these feelings being there. What I always, when I leave Berlin, when I leave my Berlin bubble, I always feel this. It doesn't take long if you are in a region where people want to well grab your hair and just stuff. You know, you should never do that in Berlin, but you have to be really careful. But you're going to the countryside and you don't have to visit Brandenburg. You also have the western areas where you're falling back 20 years. We're not back in the debate for 20 years, but Berlin is 20 years in the future and doesn't understand where the rest of the country is. And I think you felt this backlash where most of the people in Germany thought this is enough with diversity and gender, and they joined the AfD. Do we think that the politicians are living in Berlin? They're in a cosmopolitic bubble, and they lost the connection to the small white man. I think I want to talk about the guilt of the AfD. Someone from Cicero told me that I am guilty as for the rise of the AfD, and we just made it wrong. And I think it's an interesting point, also what you said, that many people join the AfD. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but since the 80s, maybe also before, there were questions that 15 to 20 people are kind of against people from other countries, so they are racist. Not all of them are racist, but there's some kind of tendency to say that this is kind of strange to me. And this, yeah, there's a potential of the AfD that's not completely sourced. And I think it really makes sense that in the 90s there was the opening of the border, everything was new. Everyone wanted to elect the safe way. And now we're thinking, okay, we can just go for it and vote for the protest and see what happens. And we can just voice our own decisions and stuff like that. So maybe there's a myth that we have some kind of right-wing step and people are mobilized. They saw my face and I said too much. It's really difficult for me to believe. And the gender toilets, that people are kind of surprised because they weren't just taken by the gender mainstream. I think it's a myth. Do you think we didn't really request too much, but we requested something that irritated people? I would say that guilt is not a category in the political discourse. Guilt is not a category in the political discourse, especially if it's individualized. If you're kind of part of the society where this happens, but this is simple. But you can talk about the dynamics, how we react to certain things, and I think this is really future useful. So I would say no. Well, if you say now it's not really a right-wing step in a society. If we see the other countries, have you forgotten the 90s? There's always a part of the society that's kind of right-wing. It has a different form now, and you have to look at it, and you have to be serious about it. But you shouldn't just say, well, it's completely new, and you have to step into this polarization, and you have to be self-critical. Yeah, well, in the 90s, we said that migration is great, migration is innovative, and you have these special areas. It's a potential, but so you have this human capital in your mind, but you have to just fix this. You also have to say what did they fight for? There's stuff we fought for, but we have to go further, and it's really important. If you want to criticize racism, here's racism, here are things happening. You really have to think what's good on this thing, and there's different relationships. Is there something more? Is there something better than in the earlier years? You can't imagine what it meant to live in that time. But we also have to do something about racism criticism. And we have to look at things that are pretty good, but because people fought for this, and not only we did it, but together with other peoples, with churches, there were so many parties involved, but they weren't alone, and our people also joined that. And this is a potential where you can say, well, this is the history, and this is a fact, I would say, and there's a potential behind it.
But Kijan, how comes that we have a government where there's no one with a migration background in there? No person of migration background in the government. And now you have to really look at this and look at the selection mechanisms. And they start at parties or systems of educations. What are the habitual, like who sees themselves as politicians and who doesn't, and who sees themselves as a part of the German project. I can't give a clear answer to this, but we have to really talk about this. There's selection mechanisms, and that's what I'm saying, to see that. But we also have to say, how did things improve? Like we four are on a podium, it wouldn't have been possible in the 70s. Okay, but regarding the government, the reason why there's no minister, no secretary of color is that they don't care. They don't give a shit. The decision makers. And it was very, very, it was a very good example. We have 20% Eastern Germans, so we need a Eastern German minister. So they took a mayor from Berlin, mayor of a part of Berlin, so who was not very popular until now. So they found someone. And you said you don't know what's the background. And the background, the idea, the reason is that they are not interested in that. And the idea is that it's very important that you can create a Ministry of Homeland in the current time. It can be a message to all of the German, but it can also be a message to the so-called worried citizens. But then you also have to send a message to the other citizen. And that message has not been sent, or it has been sent very clearly: we don't care. So I believe what happened with the cabinet and creating the cabinet is that Ms. Merkel lost ground a lot and threw away a lot of people to just save her force. And this didn't really help with putting people with migration background on ministries, but it doesn't help if we just complain about this. If we really want this and want this to be different in the future, then we have mobilize voters. We gotta grab them by the balls, and we gotta make sure that we gotta see that people who vote against that are mobilized, and we don't organize these people. So is it enough to sit in migration circles and be sad and be invited by some politicians to some exotic thing where everyone brings the food from their so-called homeland and everyone is dancing in nice dresses and it's just a nice pictures and PR and you get a few euros and then that's it? And I think that's our point. And this is why we founded ourselves, to influence this, and we don't want to say we don't want 10 euro donation. We wanna be in power. Okay, seat movement is in the way. So what we're talking about is that we should maybe stop talking about all these topics in the public to be visible as people and not as in our double function as scientist and philosopher, but also German Iranian, and you are German Turkish, and so on. So we maybe just say that we take a break in the integration debate and go public only as people, as humans, complex. I think that what Kijan said earlier, it's very important. So we have to look at it in a differentiated way, and you have to make sure that Ferda is only the speaker for the German Turkish or the migrants or the Muslims or whatever. And this is important, and this is a problem of our debates. But despite that, I think that from my point of view, it actually it shows in our hashtags, which is very provocating. The debate right now is not differentiated. So I was very angry when Spiegel Online announced my column. So Ferda Ataman will speak about her life as a German Turkish citizen, and I was like, "Fuck! I don't want exactly that." So sadly, I was not able to remove that, but tomorrow I have my third column, so it turns out I'm circling around this topic. Like tomorrow I'm talking about Söder and me and how I was received in his school system. It's very abstract, of course. So the thing is, I cannot escape this, so I'm almost ready to say, like, okay, fuck it, just put this stupid German Turkish hat on top of me, and then I can say there's things that I want to say and that Dominik and Kijan might want to say with this label. Like, when in doubt, I can live with this if we are given the label of minority, even though Kijan is right that the journey has to go to a place where we say, like, this is the Germany of the 21st century, and not like these are the minorities and migrants, and then ethnic minorities or religious minorities or other minorities like the poor army, and we exclude those. Oh, sorry, I couldn't resist. This is a serious topic. We actually were discussing about this topic without them. It's very funny. All right. Okay, but don't give them the discourse. And if I have to take the stupid migrant label for this for a few weeks, that's okay. It's very interesting to say that, because that is actually one of the reasons why we took this symbol of the soldier, which was surprising to some. My credo was always like, I feel well inside the barracks and inside the uniforms more than outside. And I realized that within the officers' school in Dresden, when I was as a civilian walking through Dresden, there was many bad things happened to me, where people's days were unmade through my color of my skin. But within the barracks, that didn't have to happen to me. So in this thought, and you have to criticize the army in many ways, and you should look at this really clearly. But this one thing, this uniformity, like if you put everyone into a group, whether they want to be there or not, and you give them a common goal. And because through this hardship you become a group. And for us was the questions, do we take a step back and say we are in this group, which is very integrated in the best kind of word, but we are different. And now we are in the spotlight, and we say, yeah, but we are in a minority inside of the army, and on. And then about 50% of the people left us because they said, we are here for this, but we don't like this idea, so we're going, because we are going on stage and separate ourselves from the integration that we all already reached, that we don't experience outside, that we are actually seen as German without any questions where you are actually from. But I actually believe, and I'm really close to you, that you have to suffer through this for a bit to get our society there where we wanna see them, or where it sees itself. Then maybe you have to suffer through this polarizing way, and this might put us this will put us into the situation better.
So the question is, when does this end? When can we just take the hat off? Well, I see it as a historic expert. It's not so long. I'm nearly 30, and my whole life, well, it's so sad, and the world history doesn't have interest in our own history. So I think it's not unimportant, but sometimes you have to just relate things, and it makes stuff a little more interesting. And I made anti-racist work, but it's not always a matter thing. You catch stuff, and we're not the only one who are touched by something. It's important for me that what I really like, I'm not a friend of, well, telling people, okay, we are just German and stuff is put on ourselves and by others. And I'm not a friend of the debate, well, if you do this, you're in identity politics. There's not one political project without identity stuff. And without identity, there's no project, but there's differences. If I take my hat, and how am I, well, willing to take this hat and the other hat? And speaking in images, we have to live with the chaos, with different identities of colors and migrants, white. The things are in the room, but we shouldn't start taking them seriously. And if they're God-given, I want to discuss what white is, and I want to discuss what of color is. I was in the USA for 1 year, and as someone who was basically, well, hit by Nazis in the 90s, and in the USA I was white. Being white is special positioning, and we have to be really careful. But we have to handle this. But we should be open about the ambivalence as a characteristic. We are stuck in a situation. We're basically in the 80s, and we're 2020. We are in different time scales at the same time. That's a situation. Well, it's kind of fucked up, but it's also interesting. And you have to talk about the people, the stuff that is fucked up. And I think that's interesting if you talk about breaks. We always have the feeling that we are working against something, that we have to deliver an answer. We have forgotten about saying we have questions, but we're not sure about if it's the right way. And I thought if you do that, you win so many more people. And you also get credit when you say, well, this is racist and this is bullshit. And what I realized in the USA, I lived in Baltimore, there's a lot of racism in that city. But I also went to East Kentucky and to Virginia, and I realized what poverty is, and it wasn't black. So if we just talk about Baltimore and not about other shit that happens, poverty, when it comes to social wrongness, and we leave that to the Trumps of the world, yeah, we're not really well trained, and there's racism, and we can explain Baltimore, but we can explain West Virginia with this, and we have to have other concepts for this. Well, we also have this danger of having groups played against each other. The anti-Semitism discussion of the last time was interesting. Are you for the kippah, or there were Muslims? Where's the solidarity with a headband? And it's really interesting that the willingness to say, well, it's great to wear a kippah and to walk the streets with a kippah. And we're thinking about, well, should we really discuss stuff like headbands? Is it really difficult to mobilize people? We can talk about that, but the danger, what happens is that we're playing people against each other. Well, the one group, as a minority, we have more racism experience than the others, and this is unfair. And we have to leave the situation, and we have to talk about that. Just in our little group, yeah. We all. With the poverty, yeah. The Tafel, that's a German institution. It's a really good discussion about the Tafel in Essen. It was a racist debate, but we were talking about poverty and the lack of food. But at no moment the Tafel in Essen told us because the food is not enough, but they were just behaving wrong, and Germans first, yeah. And even in the Germans, there's a lot of diversity. They didn't talk about that. What happened there was that one group, the poor people, was played against with the migrants, and we all just let it happen. And this debate just hit the wall. And we have to stop thinking in categories. Yeah, sometimes we need this hat, but sometimes we have whatever you call it in a scientific way, we have to learn to live with it in a more lighter way. And where were the other Tafeln that said, okay, what the Tafels do is wrong? And funny thing is, this example is a good example of the polarization of the debate. It happened in Westfalen and Westphalia, and I come from Westphalia, and my mother too, and she also gave a comment on this. And is Essen in Westphalia? Yeah, well, the Ruhr area is Westphalia, yes. Oh, sorry. Well, in the end, the point I wanted to make, I got my citizenship without an immigration course. Well, the thing is that on the one hand, there was the opinion that the foreigners just push people out, and the other one said, oh, well, you're just Nazis. It was a simple example of, well, putting a simple question into the political area and build up fronts, and the people on the floor, they just needed food. Nothing changed for them. And I think it was a great example of a situation where you should have found a common ground, and you just have to look at it in a factual way. What happened? Who did what? And the church just said, okay, well, old white women just felt weird. If you just change it to different days, and if you give courses or something like that. And there was this impulse of people from Berlin, mostly, that is either the one way or the other way. And the guy doesn't really talk about that, and I think he wasn't too clever either. But I think it was a really great example of a debate that escalated in Berlin and doesn't have to do something with the reality of people that makes a cross on the paper.
Okay, we have 6 minutes left. So in conclusion so far, what I'm reading from you three, we don't have to have to let them divide us. We have to be solidary. And so we have to talk about other topics, not only migration, but also socialism, capitalism, poverty, other topics that are interesting for us. What I also hear from the army part is like we all have to suffer together, so we respect each other as people. But if you look into the future, what do we need to do? What strategies do you see in 3 minutes each, or 2 minutes each? 2 times 3 is 6. And so you can fill these. Go, Dominik. I think what we as a community will continue doing is to work on the symbol on the German soldier in uniform, wherever they will let us enter, to be in a debate. And of course, sometimes it is the problem that as a black soldier you walk through the city, and in one part people attack you because you're black, and the other part people attack you because you're a soldier, and that's a very weird experience. But I think this symbol is very fit because it's very controversial in Germany in the debate, and to show people a mirror and to open up the debate. And so we want to continue doing this, but in the society as a whole, we have to continue representation, improve representation. We have to form majorities, we have to influence and more, we have to try to create a lobby, and with this power, we have to start influencing political agendas and form German in our image. In an abstract way, I'd say we have to be way louder. I'm really impressed with how the so-called concerned citizens somehow were able to be heard everywhere, in every talk show, in the coalition debates, in every political debate. There's also the concerned citizens, and this doesn't mean me or anyone in this room. How did that happen? How could that happen? And learning from them means getting louder, and it means emotionalizing things, but I'm still not unsure how that could even work. But since these debates all go across using emotionality a lot, maybe you need to be more personal in these debates and show force in numbers. And I hope that a hashtag like this could work. And right now it's working better in the US than it does in Germany. And there are nice examples, like the N-word debate, for example. Like, it wasn't a debate, but there was a tweet by WDR. But they asked, can you still say the N-word, which was spelled out on that tweet. And so the question was like, can you still say that? But they had to retract it because there was, do you call that shitstorm if it's a good one? Because the reactions online were so forceful, and I think we need to learn how to act as a pressure group in votes, with a presence online, a presence in media, in comments, in articles. We need to make clear more strongly that we are many, and I think maybe that doesn't succeed because we are too complacent. And living in Berlin, I don't even know where Westphalia is. Kijan, you have 2 minutes to save the world. So I think that in the end, what Dominik said, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's many experiences how democratization can work. So democratization is a permanent process, and maybe we forgot that because we always think in structures. But to progress democratizations, we have to look like how can we win relevant majorities, and we have to make offerings. We have some ideas, other things we have to recreate. So we said we found a solution. We found a community in Switzerland to put that. This is like in the Swiss, that's very controversial because like a guy from Germany and like a person of color from Germany even like found such a thing. So we are being loud, but also we need to be more quiet. We need to be more emotional. We didn't talk too much about the digital, but I think that, or I believe that much of the heated and polarizing things has to be understood in a media way. So maybe we have to say like, okay, take a step back, take a breath, and to find the balance here. And we have to really hope. We have to really train that more. We have to be better at that. All of us. That's one point, and the other point is like to look at the history and to say, like, when were relevant movements, like were there alliances, like societal alliances with actors where you say like, okay, but the army, but are they really the evil one? No, let's say like how can we make an alliance? Can we jump over our shadow? And these are the moments where I, as an historian, say like this things transformed there. Like in Switzerland, for example, there was an initiative called Miteinander, and that was one of the most concerning moments. Like maybe you're saying like, oh, not candles again or whatever, but maybe we need that to find relevant majorities. So dedicated and differentiated, and that sounds very intellectual, but I believe that if you're more differentiated, you're closer to life, you're closer to people's experiences, and these are usually not easily fitting into categories. So these are more differentiated. And so if you're more differentiated, you're closer to life, and you should maybe sometimes over the course of a day, like try to inhabit positions that make your belly ache a little bit. That would I also say. All right. So we need more belly aching. We need a bit more anger, a bit more diplomacy, a bit more of everything. But we need to continue talking, and we discuss the difficult questions. We need to be discussing openly and be able to doubt. But when it works, then we need to be able to really stand against racism and for diversity. So thank you very much, this very exciting panel, and we're going to continue the discussion offline. Have a very good day. Thank you very much.